Computer audio. Dun, dun, dun. All right, cool. We got people joining. Okay. Good evening, guys and girls, everybody else. Thank you for joining tonight. We are doing bats on the last of the Loracitherians, which are carnivores, precedactylans, artiodactylans, and all their friends and family. So we're going to be moving on to primates probably pretty soon. And yeah, thanks for joining. Cool. So let's start sharing our screens. And away we go. Cool. So as always, we have a bit of a Q&A afterwards, but let's get through the class and hopefully you guys will have some questions. So we're talking about bats, big and small. Some people love them, some people hate them. I think they're fascinating. Okay. I couldn't quite think of a good book for the week, so I kind of left it. I rather leave it rather than trying to squeeze something in there that just doesn't seems a bit incongruous with everything else. So let's just move on from book of the week and go on to bats. So bats are the second most diverse order of mammals with over 1,400 known species. They are found in every environment on Earth with the exception of a few isolated islands and the polar caps. That's Antarctica and Arctica. Bats are not rodents. Everyone seems to think they are. They are in no way related to rodents. In fact, we are more related to rodents than bats are. But they're actually more related to carnivores, dogs, and we're talking millions of years of separation, but the dogs and the cats and all their forms. And historically, bats were divided into two suborders. Now, if any of you guys have done guide training or zoology training or in university or whatever, you would have learned about Macrobats or Chiroptera and Macrochiroptera, which were megabats and microbats. The Macrochiropterans are microbats, generally insectivorous. Some of them would eat nectar. And the Macrochiroptera or Macrochiroptera, depending how you pronounce it, is megabats, generally frugivores. That's been scrapped. So as of 2001, these suborders have been scrapped and they've been reclassified. So if you've done Fogasa training in Southern Africa and you've learned about Macrochiroptera and Macrochiroptera, they've been scrapped. Sorry, that's old information. So the first known bat that we have a record of is, I can never pronounce this name, Onychonycteris. Onychonycteris. It's a mouthful. And it was quite a primitive looking bat, would have looked similar to one of our large flying foxes today. And bats, quite frankly, are very difficult to store in the fossil records. So due to their size and thin bones, bats are poorly preserved in the fossil record. Most of the modern classification has completely revised previous studies due to new information and genetic studies. And we do not know what the first ancestors of bats were. They just don't preserve in the fossil records very well. But we have the first known fossils, which is that bat over there. And who knows what the future will uncover. So it's still an ongoing study, and most of our evidence is based on anecdotal fossil evidence and very strong genetic evidence. Genetic evidence trumps fossil evidence because it shows a categoric relationship, whereas fossil evidence can be anecdotal. It could be coincidentally they look related, but the genes don't lie. So the word Chiroptera literally means hand wings. Quite a lazy explanation for bats, and that's literally what they look like over there. So this is a flying fox skeleton, and you can literally see he has hands that make up his wings, unlike a bird. Okay, in fact, in terms of evolution, the closest ecological equivalent of a bat would not be a bird, but it would be a pterodactyl during the times of the dinosaurs. Remember, pterodactyls were flying reptiles. They were not dinosaurs, but they were cousins of dinosaurs. And they went extinct about 65, 66 million years ago. And bats would probably be a form of evolutionary convergence where they actually evolved in a very similar mechanism to the pterodactyls, but did not occur at the same time. So this is a flying fox skull over here. And what you'll notice over here is that it has quite a pronounced rostrum over here and very dog-like teeth. In fact, let's just putting you on mute. Okay. Sorry, someone's been muted there. So in many ways, a lot of people would select this from a dog skull, and actually it's in no way a dog skull. It's just a form of convergent evolution where an organism completely unrelated to a dog would actually evolve a very similar looking skull to it. But we'll move on to that and talk about that later. So here you can actually see the similar bone structures between a human, a bird, and a bat. And they've all got the same sort of bones. The metacarpals in bats and the phalanges in bats are far more pronounced than birds. Birds have got them quite reduced and they're almost vestigial, and they only make up a small part of the wing, whereas bats, they're an integral part of the whole wing. In fact, the wing is built around the structure of the hands. Whereas in birds, they just really provide support for a bit of flesh and mostly the feathers, which are modified scales. So the bats are quite different. Now, bat flight involves bones that are thinner and longer than birds, and this allows for bending and flexibility. This is very important. So the bat's skin is covered in minute hairs. We call these mechanoreceptors, and they can detect changes in temperature and pressure far more accurately than birds as well. Birds are basically, operating with a giant jumpsuit, and they can't feel what their feathers are feeling with any great degree, whereas the bat's skin is being receptive to all the environment around them. And bats only have, bats also have 3 extra digits that directly assist with flight movements. Birds only have 1 digit. And bats are actually capable of far more maneuverability than birds and are capable of incredible agility in flight, far better than birds. They can turn on a dime. And that's due to the fact that they're longer, thinner, more bendy, more flexible. Their skin actually picks up the temperature, the pressure in the air, whereas a bird is basically just relying on passive information. So they're just generally actually better flyers than birds in an interceptor role, not in gliding and not in soaring. Birds are definitely better than that. But if you're talking about the lifestyles of bat as an interceptor, they're definitely better built for it than birds are. And it'd be interesting to see in 10, 20 or 30 million years time, when bats and birds start competing over more territory, which group of animals will start to outcompete which. So here you can see over here, it's just a thin membrane. It's incredibly thin. And those are the hand structures over here. And a lot of people find bats to be quite disgusting, but I actually find them quite endearing in their own little way. Now, bat wings are just membranous skin. There's no feathers. There's nothing special about it. It's just the skin stretched over effectively their hands. And they're capable of suffering small punctures and still being able to fly. Even a big puncture, they will unfortunately be grounded for a few days, but it grows incredibly quickly. So even if their bones break, a lot of people find bats with broken wings and they think they have to be euthanized, but a lot of the time they heal within a couple of days. And they can heal rapidly, and this ensures that they're able to fly very soon. And it's very important they fly very soon because bats have incredibly high metabolisms. So many species also allofeed, which means cooperatively feed sick or injured members of their community until they're able to fly again, especially with the vampire bats. So if a vampire bat is sick, the community will band together and feed that individual until he recovers, and they'll go off and take care of each other later in life. So it's a bit of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back later vibe. So echolocation. Echolocation is something quite well known in bats, dolphins also. They've evolved it independently. And it's very simply, it's just they bounce sound waves, most of which we're not able to hear, off their prey. It bounces off the prey and they're able to detect it. And they don't just listen to it with their ears. They have all these receptors across their face, special structures around their nose, around the ears, which are built to receive sound signals and actually indicate small differences in vibrations and frequency, and are able to pinpoint exactly where in the dark these animals are, their prey is. And they're incredible hunters using radar. Sonar. And you can see, you'll see with bats, these organs have evolved independently numerous times, but they all kind of end up producing the same sort of result. A highly effective sonar-based interceptor that is incredible hunter. Now, digestion in bats is something quite interesting, is that they have incredibly fast digestion, not only because of their metabolism, and they can typically process their food in 15 to 30 minutes. And this is due to the fact that they actually have a very rudimentary digestive system. And that's because a complex digestive system would weigh far too much for them to fly. So they have to have a quite simple digestive system, pass it through the system quickly, poop it out, and go on with their lives. There's a lot of wastage, but that actually produces guano, which is great for farming and great for the environment. Even rodents of a similar size to a bat will take 3 to 4 times as long, making them actually fairly slow by comparison. Now, aging in bats is quite interesting as well. So bats are extremely long-lived compared to their size. You'd think that an animal that small would only live for a few months, but actually many species, including incredibly small species, live for up to 30 years. Now, the oldest individual ever known is a Brandt's myotis, which is also called Brandt's bat, from Siberia. And one individual has been proven, they've been documenting this individual for over 41 years, and they know he's at least 41 years old. It's this little guy over here. This is actually a photo of him. So they've captured him, they've recorded him, they've microchipped him, and they know he's been around for over 41 years. Pretty cool stuff. Now, torpor is another word we have for hibernation. Now, when many bat species in temperate areas do migrate, especially in North America, others go into a state of hibernation or torpor. And the heart rate actually reduces to as little as 1 beat per minute. Now, we've on average gone between 80 and 120. Most bats are ranging between 300 to 700 beats per minute, so they're much faster than us. But at their worst, they're going down to 1 beat per minute. And their body temperatures also drop to a few degrees above freezing, like maybe 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. So really, they are just holding on for better seasons. Now, in terms of records, the largest bat in the world is the golden crowned flying fox, and has a wingspan of 1.8 meters. It is a bloody big boy, as you can see over there. And they are not carnivores. They're not gross. They're not going to fly into your hair. They are frugivores. They eat fruit, particularly fig fruit. And they're one of the major dispersers of fig fruit. So don't worry about flying foxes. They're quite endearing. And flying foxes are not major disease spreaders, even though they look horrifying to some people. The smallest bat in the world, and yes, that is a human finger, is Kitty's Hog-Nosed Bat. And it's only 3 centimeters long and 10 centimeters wide. It's got a wingspan of 10 centimeters and a body length of 3 centimeters. It is incredibly small. And arguably, between this and shrews, it is the smallest mammal on Earth. Mammal, not animal, obviously. Now, another thing that's pretty cool is in New Zealand, they have bat flies. Now, bat flies are flightless flies. So they're flies that don't fly. They actually piggyback on bats, and they will live in the bats' colonies, and a bat can have up to 10 individuals on them. And the bats are actually not really the host for the plant. It's the guano they want. So they land on the bats, they hitch a ride, and they burrow into the guano, and they lay their eggs in there. And the males will actually mate with the females and guard the nest. So there's almost a form of like ant-like structure where it's almost a form of a hierarchical or a caste system, very similar to ants and termites, where you have females, often just one female laying her eggs, one male mating with her, and numerous other males that are past their mating age actually guarding the eggs and protecting them until they hatch. And then the larvae eat the guano, and they move on with their lives. And they go from one bat colony to another bat colony, and they're just a New Zealand bat flies. So pretty horrifying. I was mortified when I saw this image, and I realized that they were just piggybackers. So it's a flightless fly. So it's a not fly. And over here, what you guys can see is that I was explaining to you guys, you can see the relationship between bats and other animals. So carnivores down here, and bats and carnivores broke off probably around 50 to 60 million years ago, and the first known bat being about 52 million years. Primates and rodents are way over here in the totally unrelated, but the Laurasiatherians include shrews, Perissodactylans, the bats, Artiodactylans, and all those guys over there. So they're not in any way related to rodents. In the past, I remember even the 1980s, people used to think they were related to rodents because the genetic studies didn't show anything otherwise. But with genetic studies, we've shown that they are not related to rodents. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the 2 groups of bats. Okay, remember we used to call them Microchiroptera and Macrochiroptera or Chiroptera. We now call them Chiroptera, and we'll discuss the next group next because it's quite a mouthful. So Chiroptera are microbats. They are small bats, but they're not all the microbats. There's actually quite a few different groups. Now, Chiroptera include many species that are insectivores, but others are often frugivores. Nectivores. They eat nectar. Especially in South Africa. If you come from South Africa, you've heard of the sausage tree. The sausage tree almost exclusively relies on bats to be fertilized, to be pollinated. So these include sack-winged bats, smoky bats, long-winged bats, free-tailed bats, disc-winged bats, vesper bats. There's a whole lot over here. And remember, there are over 1,400 species of bats on Earth. They're the second most diverse group of mammals next to rodents. Rodents are the most diverse. Bats come in a close second. So sack-winged bats are some of the smallest bats in the world. Some of these species are actually audible to humans. They're quite low frequencies, and they're found throughout tropical and subtropical regions worldwide, in the Old World and the New World. Remember, the Old World to the Americas, sorry, the New World to the Americas, the Old World to Africa and Asia. The smoky bats, there are only 2 species. They are both thumbless, for what it's worth, which means they have a hard time gripping onto surfaces, and they have very broad ears, and they're found in Central and South America. Long-winged bats are incredibly fast, extremely agile bats. Okay, interceptors, and they hunt out in open area, and they even have been known to take other small bats from time to time. And many species are known to migrate hundreds of kilometers. Okay, and they're found throughout most of the Old World. There's one particular group that actually migrates throughout China, flies over 800 kilometers through its migration. The long-tailed bats are able to fly up with speeds up to 90 kilometers an hour. That's bloody fast for a bat. And of all the bats, they also live at the highest altitudes, with species being found at 3,000 kilometers above sea level. Sorry, I'm being harassed by a mosquito here. I need actually a bat to take it out. Okay, the ghost-faced bats. I love that name, the ghost-faced bats. And they have leaf-like projections from their lips rather than their nose. And again, it amounts to the same sort of biological purpose. They detect their prey's vibrations, or they use echolocation to pick up on their prey with their lips rather than with their nose. And they're limited to the tropics, and they do not hibernate. So they're found throughout Africa and Asia, but just the tropical areas. The New Zealand short-tailed bats, there's only 1 species alive. Until the 1960s, there were 2 species alive. It's unusual because they actually spend most of their time walking rather than flying. So they walk on all 4s, and they hunt then they forage in the soil, and they eat fruit and berries, and also insects, occasionally scorpions, spiders, whatever they can catch. There were 2 species, the greater short-tailed bat and the lesser short-tailed bat. The greater short-tailed bat went extinct shortly after rats and cats were introduced to the Big South Cape Island, and through some just very poor control, and they went extinct a few years later because they were just eaten to extinction. So yeah, humans again introducing organisms, and that's why I'm so fanatical about alien invasives, because they are really one of the biggest causes of extinction and ecological collapse. The suckerfoot bats, which are endemic to Madagascar. If you remember me ranting on Facebook, I said endemic means it only occurs in that area. Indigenous means it does occur in that area, but it may occur in other areas. Endemic means it specifically occurs in that area. So these species are endemic to Madagascar. There are only 2 species, and they use their sucker cups on their wrists and ankles to attach themselves to the rolled leaves of the traveler tree, a Ravenella madagascariensis, which looks a lot like the strelitzias in South Africa. In fact, they are related. So actually carve into the rolled leaves, and they'll attach themselves and they'll sleep there. So they don't roost in caves. Funnel-ear bats are found through Central and South America and the Caribbean Islands. Nothing particularly special about them, but they have long tails and funnel-shaped ears. Bulldog bats, really cool bats, found in Central and South America, and they're actually fish specialists. They use echolocation to bounce off the water surface, and they hunt fish off the water surface. And they can eat up to 20 fish an hour this way. And they've been recorded up to, some of them even 60 fish. They literally just, now bear in mind, the fish are not this size. They're small little guppies like that size, but they're still bouncing off the water surface, taking fish. It's incredible. Hollow-faced bats, another really cool name. They're found in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Africa, and nothing particularly interesting about them. They just have long tails and funnel-shaped ears. Leaf-nosed bats are found in North and South America, and they're highly adaptable, and the family has extremely varied diet. They eat everything from nectar to fruit to pollen to they might even scavenge occasionally, and they include the infamous vampire bats. Yes, vampire bats drink blood, and they're only found in South America. We'll talk a bit about them later. Disc-winged bats are found in Central and South America, similar to the bats from Madagascar, an ecological equivalent. And they also have sucker cups attached to their limbs and root on leaves. There's a little sucker cups there, like Tom Cruise. Pretty cool stuff. Wing gland bats are endemic to South Africa, or Southern Africa. Yay us. One specifically found in KwaZulu-Natal and Lesotho. Again, yes. And they are highly adapted to living in semi-arid and arid habitats. And there are only 2 species in southern Africa. Pretty cool. The simple-nosed bats are found worldwide. They have over 300 recorded species, and they're all insectivorous. Now, the next group we're going to be talking about would include the macrobats, the big bats, but there's a lot of small bats in there as well. And these species, remember I talked about molecular clocks. So even though we don't have a fossil, we know that in terms of their genetic separation, they all separated from each other around 60 million years ago. So although we don't have the fossils, we do have the genetic studies to show when they separated. And they include a combination of micro and macro Chiroptera bats. Remember, historically, we used to just break megabats on the one side, microbats on the other side. But we've shown that some of the microbats are actually related to the megabats. And there's far fewer families, and they're actually quite interesting. So the one includes Kitty's Hog-Nosed Bat, the smallest mammal on Earth. And they're only found in Thailand and Myanmar and have a very niche habitat. They live in limestone caves along rivers. And due to the fact that limestone is being blasted out for cement uses and also for people encroaching on their habitat, these poor little bastards are declining in number quite aggressively. Old world leaf-nosed bats, there's around 70 species found throughout the world. And we're not very clued up on them, to be completely honest. We're still trying to understand them. We know there's 70 species. There may be more. The studies are still ongoing, and we don't know too much about them. The false vampire bats are found throughout Central Africa, Asia, and Australia. And they were originally considered to be sanguinivores. There's a big fancy word for you, blood drinkers. But they were later to be established to be insectivores. There were rumors going around they drank blood, but they don't drink blood. They eat insects. And they include 3 species that hunt other bats, okay, which is pretty cool. So bats that hunt other bats, the hog-nosed bat, the greater false vampire bat, and the ghost bat. Megabats, my personal favorite. They generally don't rely on echolocation because they are frugivores. You don't need echolocation to find fruit. You just need a pair of eyes and a sense of smell. And some species have heart rates of up to 700 beats per minute. And their sense of smell is phenomenal. In fact, comparable to many dogs. Horseshoe bats, they're closely related to the old world leaf-nosed bats, and they're only found in the old world. And they're well-known carriers of various coronaviruses, including SARS. So these guys are problem bats, for want of a better word. In fact, it's speculated that the current COVID-19 crisis came from horseshoe bats as well, but that's up in the air. And part of the problem is that they are, for some reason, because they're often quite colorful, they're black and white, and some of them bright brown, reddish brown, ruddy. And they're aggressively hunted for traditional medicine in both Asia and Africa. So it's not Asia as part of the problem. Mouse-tailed bats just look wicked cool. Nothing particularly special about them. They just have long tails, and they occur throughout the old world as well. Now, vampire bats, remember, are only found in South America. There's only 3 species alive today. They're all called vampire bats: the common, the hairy-legged, and the white-winged bat. And interestingly, they have actually a predilection, a preference for pigs of all animals. That's their number one source. Given the options, they'll always go for pigs. Cattle coming second, humans way down the line, because we tend to be less oblivious of our environment. Cattle are pretty dumb. And humans don't get preyed on. And it doesn't come and bite you on the neck. What it does is it bites you, leaves a small little indentation, it bleeds a little bit, and they lap it up with their tongue. So they don't latch on, suck on like a leech. Okay, there's all this mythology, and they don't do that. So bats are what we refer to as natural reservoirs. And they're exceedingly good at being host for a variety of infectious diseases, everything from Ebola to rabies to COVID-19 to yada, yada, yada. And this is due to the high number of diseases found in bat colonies and their ability to both survive and spread these diseases. We refer to them as natural reservoirs. Some species are natural reservoirs because they just retain the diseases. So scientists are still studying and debating why bats are so successful at surviving and spreading diseases, but we've come up with some conclusions at the moment. So one discovery is that the genes responsible for coding proteins that repair damaged DNA is far more prevalent in bats than other animals. So the bats actually recover from these diseases, so they hold on to them. Also, bats are very long-lived. So not only do they live long, They also survive the disease, so it remains in their colonies, and they pass it around from individual to individual. So those diseases are just swirling around in their gene pools, and they don't really get hurt by it. They're fine. So it just kind of sticks around. Bat colony is also extremely dense, living in the tens of thousands sometimes. So you've got long-lived individuals who are immune to the diseases, living in close proximity, just spreading those diseases around. So no wonder they're going to have a ton of diseases. And they don't die out, obviously because of the diseases, so it just builds up. And bats also really develop tumors, and this may be due to the same genes. In fact, bats have been used to study the potential of cures for cancer in humans, but that's an ongoing study, and we're nowhere near it. So, and despite all these issues with bats, people always talk about bats and rabies. Only 0.5% of bats carry rabies. That is an incredibly small number. So, if you had to have a bite from a bat, you've got a 0.5 chance of actually getting rabies from it. There have been incidences, but your chances of getting rabies are far higher from a dog. Far higher than from a dog. 50,000 people a year die in India every year from rabies, most of them related to dogs. Okay, now bats have a massive ecological role. Many species, especially the megabats, are solely responsible for seed dispersal, especially fig species, and pollination. They control insect numbers, especially mosquitoes, moths as well, but moths don't bug us. A single bat can consume over 600 mosquitoes an hour. It's a lot. It's a lot. So yeah, they go nuts. And they are an important food source for numerous predators: bat hawks, pythons, a lot of small cat species, mongooses, they all prey on bats. So living in high numbers and converting whatever food they're eating into a source of protein for predators, they are an important food source. Also, humans eat them, but if you're eating bats, you deserve what you get. And their droppings, bat guano, is an important contributor to soil nutrients. Okay, in fact, many areas they've been used specifically. Guano has been farmed out of caves in order to provide fertilizer for farms. Now, let's talk about the legend of Dracula. Now, everyone talks about bats. Everyone thinks of vampire bats, Dracula. Where did Dracula come from? I'm sure some people know the story, but not everyone does. So the real Dracula was actually based on the Wallachia, now Hungary, or part of Hungary, ruler Vlad III Dracula from 1428, some people say 1431, to 1477. Vlad the Impaler, as he was otherwise known as, fought against Transylvanian Saxons, which are Germanic tribes, and the Ottoman Empire, which was Turkey, which were Muslim invaders. And he famously impaled whole towns in his war to suppress his enemies. So he would use terror tactics to suppress his enemies. And if he captured enemy soldiers, he would impale them, basically saying, if you dare go to war with me, you will die a horrible death. And he was extremely violent, extremely bloodthirsty, and his reputation spread throughout Europe. And the word Dracula actually means dragon or devil in Romanian. So it doesn't mean vampire. Okay. Now, he was so well known throughout Europe for his bloodthirsty, violent warfare that he was rumored to love the taste of blood. And thus the legend of Dracula grew from that. Where the vampire Dracula came from, of course, actually came from a later source. Now, the real Vlad the Impaler died in a battle against Basarab Lota in 1477, and he was dismembered, he was beheaded, and his head was sent to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Mehmed II, and there it remained until it disappeared. Now, in 1897, Bram Stoker, the writer, developed the character Count Dracula from the pre-existing legend into the fully fledged, blood-drinking, shape-shifting monster that we all know and love today, and all the god-awful Twilight stuff that we have to put up with on top of that. Vampires are not cool, people. Please, can we drop it? Okay, I'm tired of listening to vampire TV series and vampire music and vampire nonsense. Okay, it was cool with Dracula. Let's move on. Okay, so of course we all know about Batman. Now, Batman is not Marvel, guys. Please, that is important. DC is one thing, Marvel's another thing. Okay, if you don't know the difference, learn it. DC stands for Detective Comics. Okay, Marvel is entirely different. Marvel was started by Stan Lee. And Batman was actually developed by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. A lot of people actually think that Bob Kane stole the idea from Bill Finger, and that's a whole other department. I'm not going to discuss that. So Batman, of course, we all know and love him, but he's not a Marvel character. So if you keep confusing him with Iron Man and all that, please get an education. Okay, so bats, as you can see, are extremely diverse, probably far more diverse than you ever realized. And they have a massive ecological role, and they have a massive cultural impact on us as well. They're extremely valuable, and we should make an effort to understanding them. They've been persecuted throughout history due to their association with death and disease. Numerous species have gone extinct, and we're finding new species all the time. And just 2 years ago, we found new species. There's an excellent website called batcon.org, which is a website which will help you learn about bats and study them and get involved in bat conservation. You can also get a bat house in your home if you want. And statistically speaking, domestic dogs are far more dangerous to people than any species of bat. So, on that note, thank you for the presentation, short and sweet. Any questions, guys?
I have a question, Nick.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
What is the name of the bat responsible?
Sorry? For COVID-19 hog-nosed bats.
For the name of the bat responsible for pollinating the baobab?
Oh, baobabs. I'm drawing a blank. When we do the next session, I'll tell you. Or I can put in the nature group. I've completely forgotten. I learned that years ago. We don't have baobabs in our area.
I was reading fruit bats.
Yeah. So the fruit bats, see, now fruit bats, there's many kinds of fruit bats. Some of them are macrobats, some of them are megabats. And I really cannot remember which one the baobab is. For the life of me, I can't. We don't have baobabs in my area. I learned it years ago. I'm not even going to try guess. I can look it up and tell you though. Maybe I can post it in the nature group.
Yeah, I will research myself as well. I mean,
there we go.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, with the sheer number of bats that we have, it's very hard to keep track on what species you have in your area. And it's actually probably good to get yourself a mammal ID book and just, take photos. That's the only way, and then work out what you have living in your home. Any other questions, guys?
Hi, Nick. It's Michelle. How are you?
Hi, Michelle.
Good. No, I was just going to mention that I live in near Bryanston, and so in the last couple of years we've started getting Wahlberg's epileptic fruit bats.
Oh, lovely.
They used to only come down as far south as Pretoria in the past, but with the gardens and the changing climate, we've had.
Sorry, we had a losing signal there.
We haven't seen them during the winter months, but in summer they seem to return, and then they appear here in Bryanston in a huge colony, and I've rehabbed some of them and released them back into the colony here. So that was very, very special. And then we also get Mozambican tomb bats, which they're usually on the unlike the other bats, the ones we get here mostly are the Cape Serratines or the Rusties, but which are in colonies together. But the Mozambican tomb bats, they are so special, and they sort of will sit on the side of your wall. And I've been asked before to come and catch them and remove them because people are scared of them.
Yeah. Michelle, I think we lost you again. The signal's very bad tonight.
The sideways movement.
Yeah.
But they are really.
Guys, the signal's very bad. Yeah, I'm not hearing you at all, Michelle.
Oh, sorry. Okay, never mind.
Okay, what we can do, maybe what I can do is I can schedule in a Q&A, because I think we should just have a general Q&A, maybe on Wednesday, and we can have a chat. So what I'll do is I'll put an invite for Wednesday, and we can just chat about bats and mammals in general and recap everything we've done, because it'd be nice to catch up with people. So if you guys are down for that, because I think we've got a lot of bad weather at the moment. I can barely hear anybody. So I'm going to end it off tonight now, guys. Thank you for joining. Yeah, because I can't hear anything. So we will end it tonight, and then I'll put an invite out for Wednesday, and we'll do some Q&A, and we'll just catch up on everything we've discussed. Maybe people got things to contribute. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Yeah, thanks so much for popping by. And again, you got my WhatsApp if you want to ask me any questions. Okay, guys. Auf Wiedersehen. Adios. Arrivederci. Bon voyage. Ciao.